Jesus jumping Christmas shit. It's time for another Friday the 13th review. Welcome to my review for Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Now, this was the first Jason film I ever watched where Jason wears the mask all the way through, because my first ever film in this series was Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Yeah, I'm probably one of the few people in the world for whom that was their first Jason experience. I don't mind. It's not a bad film as far as I'm concerned, but the final chapter was the second one I moved on to. I used to rent this from a video store which was just down the street from where me and my dad lived during the 90s. It was an independent store, not one of those big blockbuster chains. And I reckon I rented this same copy of the film like 2 or 3 times throughout that decade at least, and watched it multiple times each time that I rented it. And this store closed down at some point towards the end of that decade, as all the video stores did eventually. And this guy gave his stock away when he was closing down to all of his sort of loyal customers. So me and my dad ended up with a few films, and one of those was the final chapter. So I ended up owning the same copy that I'd been renting out for years from this guy. It was kind of cool. Sadly, I don't still have it. I think it disappeared during one of my house moves at some point, which is kind of sad, but you don't realise at the time just what sentimental value these things will have like 20 years down the line, do you? It's not like I would watch it if I still had it. I could easily go out and buy another copy of this on VHS on eBay if I wanted to, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be that copy that I used to have, if you see what I mean. And it was oversized, this VHS copy that I had as well. It was sort of like an inch bigger than all the other official VHSs that we had. So it really stuck out like a sore thumb on the shelf. I don't know if, because this was intended to be the final film, that they decided to release it in a slightly extra large box or something. It was bizarre. So anyway, on to the main part of today's review. And the story is similar to that of part 3. It's a bunch of partygoers renting a summer house close to Crystal Lake. The only difference this time is that there's a family living quite close to this summer house, and also in the woods there's this guy camping who has beef with Jason Voorhees. We'll come to him a bit later on. Now, this review is going to be mostly positive because I love this film. I've got a long association with it. I will sprinkle 1 or 2 little curveballs in there now and then though, because I do have 1 or 2 little niggles about the film, but for the most part, I am probably going to wax lyrical about the whole thing. And let's start with a massive positive, which is the Jason that we have in this film, played by Ted White. I would say, along with Brooker from part 3, he's one of my favourites. I don't know why they changed the Jasons so often in this series when the films came out really close together. I mean, if you've got a great Jason like Richard Brooker from part 3, or why replace him? If you've got Ted White, right, why replace him? You've got CJ Graham, why replace him? It's really weird. It's not like these guys were going off doing major roles elsewhere and they were just too busy. I mean, I don't know, it's weird that it's strange that we had to get all the way to part 8 to finally get a repeat Jason, but Ted White's definitely a good, and he absolutely rocks in this film. So if we move into the characters, this film has 3 of my favourite characters in the entire franchise. One of them is Jimmy, or Jim Bob, played by Crispin Glover. This guy is just the coolest nerd to have ever been in a movie. In fact, Crispin Glover has done 2 of my favourite performances from the 1980s, this, and when he plays George McFly in Back to the Future. I don't think he really did anything else famous after the 80s, not anything that I know of anyway. I saw an interview, or heard an interview, I should say, on the radio, I think it was, a few years ago, where he was talking about some independent film he was about to do in the Czech Republic, of all places. I thought to myself, mate, you should be in blockbusters showcasing your talent, because you are so talented. I mean, his acting in this film alone is just perfection. Every scene, he just does so much with the material. If you just watch him, his hand movements, his facial movements, even when other characters are talking, it's just absolutely amazing. And that dance, I mean, that's the sort of moment that makes a film a cult classic. You know, moments like that are so hard to actually write. I could easily believe that that was just something that came out of Crispin Glover on the night that they were filming or something. It may well have done. It's been a while since I watched the Crystal Lake Chronicles documentary or whatever it was called for this, but that dance is just awesome. I mean, is it even possible to repeat the movements that he does in that dance? It's a bit like the pen twirling thing that Boris does in Goldeneye. It's just, how do you even replicate it? So I love that performance by him, and his mate as well. That would be my second character I love in this film, played by Lawrence Monson or something. His name's Teddy Bear in the film, or his nickname is. What a name for a character, and what a chat up line as well. I mean, would that ever work? You know, that whole teddy bear chat up line thing. But that guy with his invisible computer, and he's just so funny. And it's really hilarious how he starts this film being all Billy Big Bollocks about, you know, giving advice to Jimmy about women. And then by the end of the movie, he's literally the only guy who was not pulled. But the script doesn't make him an arsehole. That's what I really like. So by the time that Jimmy comes downstairs with the knickers or panties, whatever you want to call them, and throws them at Teddy Bear, he's not like being really jealous about it. He's sort of gone the other direction, and he's really happy for his mate. And I like the fact that their last moment in the film together is just having a laugh, because there has been a little bit of tension throughout the film, but it's good that they sort of finished the film on good terms, because I could watch an entire movie with these two away from Friday the 13th, a spin-off or something, you know, Teddy and Jimmy do Las Vegas. That would be really cool. Teddy and Jimmy do New York. Or Teddy and Jimmy do the Playboy Mansion. The possibilities are just endless, because those two are just absolutely fantastic. My third really favourite character in this film is a little bit less obvious than the other two, and that would be Sarah, who is the last of the partygoers to die. I think it's Sarah and not Sarah. I always get mixed up between Sarahs and Sarahs in movies, but this girl is absolutely adorable. She's probably one of my favourite women in slasher films. And I think that she should have been the final girl for this. I've got my reasons. I've got some logic behind this. So you've got the family on one side and you've got the partygoers on the other side. And the two worlds never really collide. There's this one introduction scene where Trish and Tommy cross the street and say hello. And apart from that, that's it. The two sets of characters never really meet again. Now, what I think should have happened is that Trish should have been the one to die. She's not an amazing final girl. She's okay. I think she should have died. And I think Sarah should have survived from the partygoer side and joined up with Tommy for the final battle. So you would have had one representative, therefore, from each of the two houses. And I think the motivations in that situation would have been immense, because if Tommy had seen his sister die, it would have added so much more weight to the whole die, die, die. Whereas as it is, I don't think he even sees his mum's body unless I've just completely forgotten about it. Now, on the Sarah side, she has presumably spent absolutely ages trying to get with this guy who, he's the one who dies in the shower, I forget his name, but I've always got the impression that they fancied each other for quite some time, but maybe been a bit shy about actually getting together. So this weekend away has been the perfect time for them to get over their inhibitions and get together, and that's what they've done. And I think that Sarah seeing that guy dead in the shower could have really tipped her over the edge for the final battle and given her motivation to really go at Jason like a tiger. And I think she would have had more umpire than Trish in that situation, who's basically just trying to survive. So I mean, it's not a massive deal, but that's one little niggle that I would have changed about the story, because it is a little bit problematic having these two groups and they never really come together or have anything to do with each other. But just my 2 cents. I know I've got a picture of the twins on my thumbnail, but I'm not massively into them. The moment where they first turn up on the path near the lake, it's kind of like, whoa, look at these two, and watching them skinny dip is kind of fun, but once they get to the party, I hate the way that they're dressed. I mean, why would you wear golf trousers to go to a party? Why have they done their hair up like they're going to a job interview or something? The whole dress sense there is just completely off. They look better in the middle of the afternoon. And why would they dress the same as each other? If I had a twin brother who looked exactly like me, I'm pretty sure that I would not want to match his dress sense. I'd want to go my own way, be my own person. So that's kind of weird. I'd be sort of interested to know whether that's a common thing in twins, or whether the people in this film just didn't understand twins. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Rob, a really cool character. And unlike some people, I don't mind the way that he dies in this film. You know, the whole, he's killing me. I quite like that line. You know, it's just so brilliantly ironic. He's talked himself into hunting Jason. He's got a machete. a shotgun. He's a big stocky guy. You'd think he'd be able to take any of the partygoers in this film in a fight. So he's all prepared for this thing, and yet when it comes down to it, he just kind of goes out on a whimper. But that's the sort of thing that would happen in real life. You know, it's called Sod's Law. Trish and Tommy, two people you would think are completely unsuitable to be taking on Jason, end up defeating him. But sometimes life is like that. It throws up unexpected results. One thing I did think they got wrong when it comes to Rob is his reason for being at the lake. I think he's trying to get revenge for his sister Sandra. I could be wrong about that. I think it's Sandra from part 2. One thing I'm quite certain of is the fact that it's not Vicky from part 2. I think that's the person that he should have been avenging, because she's a really cool character. And I think that instead of make Vicky the sister of Rob, I think they should have made Vicky his girlfriend. How funny would that have been if we'd have discovered 2 films after the fact that this Vicky character from part 2 had this gorgeous boyfriend back home, and yet as soon as she gets to this camp training centre thing, she's immediately trying to get with this guy in a wheelchair. I would have been really humoured by that anyway. I don't know, maybe they just didn't think of that, or they didn't want to crap on a beloved character from a past film, I don't know. But if it was Sandra, I think it was, then they could have slipped in a line like, oh, she wasn't even old enough to be going to camp in the first place. I should have just kept her at home or something like that. But the scene where Rob leaves his tent and walks off because he hears a noise or something, and Jason is destroying his shotgun, that's a really creepy scene. And I'm kind of surprised that Jason doesn't take him out at that point, because for most people he probably would. Because when Rob's walking back to his tent, I'm thinking we're going to get the jump scare where Jason pops out and kills him, and it doesn't happen. There's a similar scene earlier on in the film where Sarah's walking away from the main group and she hears twigs rustling and stuff, and she's looking this way and that, and she doesn't end up getting killed. Some really good writing in this movie. The scene where Tommy spots 2 characters across the road, they're just about to have sex in the window. I forget the names of the characters. It's a scene that, even if that didn't happen to you when you were growing up, it's a scene where it probably would have happened to everybody had they had the opportunity. You know, spotting 2 adults having sex across the road, you'd watch, wouldn't you? You know, 12 years old, you're curious. But I like the fact that his mum doesn't actually catch him watching, because they think that would just kind of ruin the scene a little bit. The fact that he gets away with not being seen just makes that little bit so cool. The beginning with Axel is another part of the movie that I really like. 2 very, very minor characters, and yet they're so well written, so memorable. And that's a great kill as well to start the film off with the head spin thing. That's really cool. One thing that's sort of curious about in this film is that there are characters watching stuff on TV that's supposed to be sexy, and yet it's just not. So Axel's watching these girls doing all sorts of aerobics, and he's sat there getting a real kick out of it. And I'm thinking, I personally wouldn't sit there and watch that. I mean, I'm as red-blooded as the next guy, but that doesn't really look like much of a turn on to me. And then later on in the movie, Teddy Bear's watching this, God knows what it is, black and white Charlie Chaplin type stuff, where this girl's running towards the front of a stage, lifting her skirt up, and it's all kind of sped up, and he's really getting a kick out of watching this. And I'm just thinking, why would you watch? I wouldn't watch that for more than about 10 seconds. And then I think, oh, okay, turn it off. So yeah, kind of weird. Now, I do have a couple more negatives to get through before we wrap up, but I want to make perfectly clear that I'm only sort of semi-serious about these. I've got no major complaints about this film, just kind of itsy-bitsy little niggles that I'm just getting out there for the sake of it. So one of those would be the fact that it's always troubled me a little bit that this film takes place 24 hours after part 3. Trish and her mum are jogging around the lake, seemingly oblivious to the fact that there's been 20-odd murders in this area over the past 48 hours, the past 72 hours. You'd think they would have heard something off the radio or the TV, or somebody would have called them. You've got all these party goers turning up to this summer house. None of them have heard about all the shit that's been going down at Crystal Lake. No one's heard anything about what happened at the camp training centre or Higgins Haven. Ideally, the film would have been set 2 or 3 months after part 3, although I suppose that leaves you with the problem of, where does Jason's body go in all that time? Because I presume that you can't, he couldn't stay at the hospital morgue for longer than a couple of days. So I don't know, it's a conundrum, but certainly if you examine the plot of part 2, part 3, part 4 in this series, and the fact that they're all bunched together, it doesn't quite completely stack up. Now, my other negative is the party in this film. it's really good when Jim Bob's doing his dance and all that, but once Paul puts the slow dance music on, the atmosphere in the party just completely dies and it never recovers. I mean, this is one boring party. There's no atmosphere. Nobody's talking to each other. There doesn't look like there's much booze lying around. Where's all the tidbits? And I mean, they're not introverts, these people. Well, apart from maybe Jim Bob, I guess, but there's just no atmosphere. It's one of the most awful parties I've ever seen. I just think it's a little bit of the writing that got neglected for this part of the movie, because I should want to be at that party and I don't. Whenever I'm watching this stuff, I don't particularly want to be there. The only time I want to be at this party is when that hot twin starts going from chair to chair looking for somebody to go upstairs with. But apart from that, it ain't a great party. Apart from that, though, I do love this film. I want to make that completely clear. I mean, the thing I love most about this movie is the fact that they don't try and go bigger just because they think it's going to be the last one. They just try and go better. And that's no better example than that than with the kills, because the kills aren't necessarily gorier in this film. They don't try and be cleverer, but they are just really solid and well written. You know, the guy in the shower getting his head pushed against the wall, it's simple, but it looks great. The thing with the corkscrew, simple, but it's funny, and it's a little bit gory the way he gets it in the head, but it's just such a cool kill. Again, Teddy with the knife through the projector screen, that's a great one. And all the way through the film, there's some really great kills. And as a slasher film, I can't think of many better than this, really. It's at the higher end of the spectrum when it comes to high quality slasher films. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think it's time to get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 bloody axes out of 5 for Friday the 13th, the final chapter. I'm sort of struggling to hold them all up, but there is 4.5 here. And this is the 4th consecutive time now in this series that I have given a score of 4.5. I've done it for all 4 films up to this point. Can the run keep going for part 5? That will be tricky, given the fact that Jason is not in that film and it doesn't have the most amazing of reputations. But how will I view it? You'll have to wait until next time to find out. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.